Well, some brand new evidence in a case that still haunts so many people in the Midwest. 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German went out for a hike near a bridge in Delphi, Indiana, but they never came home. Searchers found their bodies about a half-mile from that bridge the day after they went missing. Police then released this chilling audio clip recorded on one of the girls' phones. Down the hill. The prime suspect, Richard Allen, was eventually arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced to 130 years in prison. This week, Allen's legal team filing a new batch of evidence that allegedly points to another suspect or group of suspects, practitioners of a religion known as Odinism, which is a modern pagan religion that honors the Norse gods. Allen's lawyers allege the girls were killed as part of a ritualistic sacrifice based on the crime scene. So I'd like to bring in former federal prosecutor and president of Los Angeles West Coast Lawyers, Neama Rahmani. Neama, great to see you. This is really interesting. The judge had not previously allowed this to be released to the public. What is your take on this new batch of evidence as part of this appeal, especially considering it wasn't allowed in Richard Allen's actual trial?
Nicole, thanks for having me. A very sad, also fascinating case. And this appeal was expected. And I'm not saying that Richard Allen committed these murders or didn't commit them, or that it was Odinist, this pagan cult that did. But the fact that Judge Gold in the case didn't allow the defense to even present this evidence, I think Allen actually has a decent chance on appeal, and most convicted murderers don't. Normally, if you're a judge, you need to allow the defense to make their argument, let the jurors decide. But in this particular case, the judge said there's not even enough of a nexus to allow this argument to go to the jury. And that may have been a Sixth Amendment violation here.
All right, so you do think it should have been allowed, especially since there were, at least it claims that there were these eerie similarities to the layout of the crime scene, to some of these rituals, as well as the defense team pointing out that authorities originally thought it was two people, and they released those sketches of two people, but neither of whom they say ended up being Richard Allen. What do you think the judge's reasoning was to not allow this evidence in the first place?
Well, there was a lot of criticism of this judge. Let's not forget, this judge initially disqualified the two lawyers who ended up handling the case because some of the crime scene photos were taken and leaked in violation of a gag order. That case went all the way up to the Indiana Supreme Court that said that the judge made a mistake. So the case came back, and when the defense tried to make this argument saying that the positioning of Libby and Abby and some of the sticks showed that this was an Odinistic ritual, and that some of the prison guards were also members of this cult, which is important because let's not forget that Richard Allen confessed multiple times in prison. The defense argued that this was all coerced. Of course, we've all seen those two sketches. There were different eyewitnesses that really put Allen at the scene that really provided very different descriptions of him. So I think the defense's argument is that Allen was there, his vehicle was there, even if the eyewitnesses said he was there, but he wasn't the one that actually committed these murders. I'm not sure he'll carry the day, but there's a decent chance that he gets a new trial where the defense is actually going to be able to make this argument and have those jurors decide.
Yeah, Neema, as you're talking there, we see that photo of Richard Allen, and his lawyers also say that, he confessed while he was under duress. He lost a significant amount of weight. He was in solitary confinement. Walk us through what happens next in this appeals process.
You're right, Nicole. And I mean, this is someone who was drinking toilet water, eating feces. I mean, he was in really bad shape. And I don't know if that's because of mental health issues, because of the guilt of committing these murders, fear of coercion, or something else. But it was a very, very different Richard Allen at trial than we saw when he was working at the pharmacy there in Delphi, or even when he was arrested. So what's next is going to go to the Indiana Court of Appeal that's going to take a first look at this. Then, depending on what happens, either party can appeal to the Indiana Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court of any state, just like the Supreme Court of the United States, they don't have to take every appeal. They can pick and choose which one. But given how important of a case this is for Indiana and some of these really significant constitutional issues that are at play, and the fact that the Supreme Court has already once accepted an appeal in this case, I think the likelihood of the High Court doing it a second time is high. So we're likely going to have two layers of an appeal. And if the Court of Appeal and the Indiana Supreme Court side with the defense, I don't think Allen's going to be freed. He's just going to get a new trial, in which case all this odinistic evidence will come in.
All right. So you think he may get a new trial, considering he has already been, convicted, sentenced to 130 years in prison for these murders. Do you think there's any real chance he does not spend the rest of his life behind bars?
I think he's likely going to die in state prison. And I'm a former prosecutor, Nicole. You know me. I'm usually skeptical about these appeals. Obviously, when someone's in prison, they really have no reason not to appeal. But in this particular case, there's actually a decent appellate issue. So normally I'll come on the show and I'll say, well, this is going to be a mere formality. The conviction is going to be affirmed and this individual has no shot. But in this particular case, I think there's a good defense argument. So I wouldn't be surprised if that appeal were actually granted.
We will see what happens. Yeah, a lot of people still watching this one. Attorney Neama Rahmani, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, Nicole, talk soon.